Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, the podcast where mothers share their powerful stories of healing and empowerment. I am your host, Amanda Quick, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and advocate. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of mothers who have overcome adversity, found their fierce feminine power, and embraced transformative parenting. Whether you're a mother driven to fight for your children or someone with a story burning inside you, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll explore themes of resilience, self-trust, and healing from our traumatic experiences, all spotlighting the profound journeys of awakened mothers. Join us for a space of naked authenticity, deep inspiration, and genuine connection. Embrace the divine feminine and discover your own warrior mama within. Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change. Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Awakened Motherhood. I am your host, Amanda Quick, and today I am very excited to introduce you all to Hilary. Hilary is a passionate advocate for birth mothers' rights and voices within the adoption community. As a birth mother herself, she intimately understands the complexities and emotions involved in the adoption process. Her journey began when she made the courageous decision to place her child for adoption 25 years ago while navigating the ramifications of being a sexual assault survivor. Hilary aims to inspire compassion, understanding, and appreciation for the courageous women who choose adoption motherhood has been the main focus of her life, and she has gone on to be a wife and raise 4 beautiful children of her own. Having gone for her own healing journey, in her early 40s, she hopes to foster hope and not only birth parent all women in ways to heal, persevere, and succeed in creating peaceful and joyful lives. I'm going to stop there because your bio keeps going on because I feel like I've already said a lot, and I really just want to welcome you to the show and get into the story because I want to know more already, and I'm like gonna. So basically, you have been through a lot, and you today are able to share that story to help people understand so much about both sexual assault, choosing adoption, as well as the healing journey after all of that has taken place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So welcome. And I'm really excited to dig in. In this show, I tend to start at the beginning, whatever the beginning is for people, and so obviously for you, finding out you were pregnant after an assault, it's probably the, beginning-ish and for you. And I would love if you would share however much you're comfortable sharing, of course, about, either what happened or how you felt and really what was your state of mind?
So, to begin, because this was a date, this was 26 years ago, just to put it in reference for everybody, because this was a date. I wasn't sure if that's what actually happened to me because 26 years ago, not everyone was talking about everything, the sexual and all the things. It was just kind of entertainment, was someone in the middle of an alley and then you get attacked kind of thing. So it did kind of take a little bit for me to realize what exactly had happened. Because of previous childhood traumas, I had already learned to completely freeze in those types of situations. And so my defense mechanism and my survival tactic was to freeze. I wasn't fighting back. I wasn't scratching my throat. I wasn't doing all of those things. I was people pleasing and just trying to survive. So I just,
And I think it's really important to name this right here for people because I imagine this took some time for you to even understand.
Right.
Just because you didn't fight back does not mean it wasn't an assault.
Right. Because I was like, well, I was crying, but I didn't cry enough. Or I said no, but I didn't say no 15 times. I only said no 8 times or something, so that was very confusing. Especially because I was like, oh, I chose a really dumb choice to go back to his apartment after one date, so all
that's
those
consent,
things, right?
We have this
all
belief
things,
we're consenting.
Right.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And because I wasn't beat up in the process and he wasn't beat up in the process, I didn't quite realize what exactly happened. I just knew that I never wanted to go through that again. And I was actually a virgin at the time.
Wow.
That was my very first experience with that type of thing. And so in my mind, I was like, oh, that's what people like. No, I don't need that for the rest of my life. Like that was absolutely horrible. And he said horrible things like, I've ruined you. Let everyone know that I've ruined you. Like those types of things that stick inside of your mind and your psyche and your self talk and self worth for a very, very, very long time. And so what happened was I mean, this is very TMI, maybe for a lot of people, but
It's okay.
I bled for a week straight and I thought,
Wow.
oh, that's what people do. Everyone talks about you kind of bleed a little bit or whatever, but
Yeah.
I bled for a week straight. You know, I was, I
Yeah.
was very traumatized. My body was very traumatized by what had happened. And then, I didn't start my period. And so in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, crap, he really messed some stuff up. And, because
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't brutal, but it wasn't, it was, it was bad. How everything went down. And so I really thought, oh, he messed some things up. It's totally ruined my
He
period.
broke it
Yeah,
somehow.
I put broken innards in there. I really did think that. Um, and so then I even got some pregnancy tests because I thought, oh gosh, what if? And so I took some pregnancy tests. They came back negative.
Because
So
it was too early still. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess that's not it. But then it was like another week went by, another week went by. So I went to the doctor because I was really scared. And at this time, my younger sister and I had just moved out. I was 19 years old. I didn't know anything about anything, and so
Yeah.
we were just trying to make it living on our own for the first time. And so all of this happened and I wasn't starting. I went to the doctor. The doctor actually asked me why I was there. And so I told him everything. And when he came back, he had me take a urine test to check for pregnancy. And when he came back, actually, he started crying. The doctor did. And he said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but you're pregnant. And I just lost it because I was by myself. I couldn't believe what happened in the first place. And I had realized what happened shortly thereafter and called it what it was. But then to have this on top of it was pretty devastating. Um, and so I had to make that call to my parents, which was not easy. And my dad, oh, sorry, I was in Utah at this time, and I grew up in California. So once I told my parents, my dad drove out the next day and he took us back home. And and
Yeah.
from then
You're done
on,
being on your own.
yeah, that didn't work out very well, you know. But it was it's hard being back it would have been almost easier to go through the pregnancy somewhere where people didn't know you because
Mm-hmm.
at the time I was still going to church. And so, as I'm getting bigger and bigger, people are whispering, they're asking questions, they're wondering what's going on. And you really can't wear, a banner and it's not anyone's business, like there's just a lot that
Right.
goes
You're not
into
going to
that.
wear a banner that I was assaulted and this is what it
Right.
looks like. Like you can't do that.
Right. Well, and what's interesting is because I was still very involved in my church, when I told them what happened, there were ramifications for me just even being in the same room making out. And so I really did feel like it was my fault for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I did pray a lot about what to do. I've always been one who was very comfortable around children. I always wanted children. Being a mom was like my thing I wanted to do. And so part of me was like, I can do this. I can make this happen. It's fine. But I just prayed about it. There was also the other option. Even the church that I was going to said, you have the option to abort this child if you don't want it because of the circumstances, all of those things. So it was a really heavy decision for a 19-year-old. I think about my girls. I have two that have been 19 now, and I can't even imagine them having to make that type of decision. And I just felt like I just knew that the other two options weren't options that I was comfortable with. So I chose adoption.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to meet with a social worker, and she brought me the binder full of families. And I was in more Northern California, and I just wasn't feeling a connection. It's interesting because once you go through a folder like that, you almost want to be a surrogate for all the 500 families that are wanting children. You just see these couples, and you're like, oh my God.
Like, I wish I had babies for
Yes.
everybody.
Yeah, like everyone deserves the child. I'm so sorry, like, and then because I thought about it that way too. I was like,
Yeah.
and my body took a pregnancy that quick, and it wasn't even, and then
And these people are all struggling
for years. Yeah. So there's that part of motherhood too, of feeling like that camaraderie, but also that empathy for these mothers who have to go a different route.
Well, and almost there's a level of almost guilt, even that
yes,
you right, you didn't want to be pregnant, but you have the ability to.
Yes.
And this is something that I don't think people talk about. Whether
Right.
I am the person who gets pregnant too easily.
Yes.
I have been pregnant 7 times now. I have 3 children.
Right.
And there is guilt. Like
Mhm.
there is guilt in that people are struggling and I don't. And what makes me and I don't want this. So now I feel even guiltier.
Right. Yeah. Because then these people are wanting it so bad, and then also having to be like, oh, I don't choose you. So it was just a very weird thing to have to go through. But I wasn't feeling quite of that connection just yet, and so they brought up binders of families from Southern California. And I was going through them, and I just kept going back to this one couple. And I just knew. I did talk to a church leader once I made that decision, and he threw in this little thing right before I was leaving. He was like, just make sure they're tall. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, that's a weird thing to say. But when I went back and I looked, I wasn't really even looking at their height or anything. And when I went back, the dad was 6'5", the mom was 5'9". And I was like, okay, that's kind of like a good solidification or validation that perhaps I'm making the right choice. And
Almost like a sign, because it didn't really make sense.
Yeah. Because he literally, as I was leaving, he just threw it out there.
Such a weird thing to say, but okay, yeah.
But what happened was, he ended up being very, very, very tall for his age. By the time he was 3, he was the size of a 6-year-old. Like, he was always very, very big, very tall. So that, I was like, okay, like everything lined up how it was supposed to.
Yeah.
But going through that, as a young person, as a single person, as someone who didn't want this, it definitely switched my thinking from this tragedy and this trauma to something that was love. And it came down to love. And, even after I had him, it was 24 hours. And then he was placed with the parent. As I left the hospital, and then like an hour later, he was placed with them. So, that he's crying. Oh, I guess, yeah, I had a son. I had a boy. And he was crying in the hospital. And I said, if you don't stop crying, I can't do something. And he did. And so I was able to get up the courage to leave and to know that I was doing the right thing. And, that's always really weird. I don't know if there's other moms who have either placed or who have lost children in the hospital. It's very hard to leave the hospital with no baby in hand. And even the nurse, she was my mom was pulling the car around for me, and she was in the elevator with me, and she didn't say anything because she didn't know what to say or do. And it was just this awkward kind of like, I have to pull myself up by the bootstraps by myself. I have to walk out that door by myself,
Yeah. Yeah.
and do
I've
this.
had people on this show who've lost babies.
Right.
And a later term, so they did have to go through the delivery
Right.
process, and so
Yeah.
they're leaving the hospital, empty-handed.
Mhm.
Um, I think you're the first one who's given up a baby for adoption on the show.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because now on the other side of things, as I know more about kind of generational cycles,
Yeah,
my mother, her very first child was stillborn, and she had to
interesting.
walk out of the hospital with no baby, and so it the same, it just looks a little different. Obviously it's a
Mhm.
very, very different circumstance, but that cycle of losing your firstborn,
That feeling.
that
Yeah.
feeling, yeah. And also it was a boy, and then she had a bunch of girls, and that was me. I had a bunch of girls after, you know. But but yeah, it was it was a lot of therapy. But you don't even realize kind of the ripple effect of something like that happening. Even I thought I was doing really well, and then I would be triggered by a movie or by someone talking about something. And, or if things were going wrong in my marriage, I immediately thought it was my fault. Or, see, yep, I am ruined. I am not, like all those self worth things that start coming through and bleeding into relationships. Or, I had girls, and I thought, I love my girls so, so, so much. But part of me was like, so I never get to have a boy of my own. I thought like that for quite a while. Um, and now just realizing more of how connected we are
Mhm.
spiritually and energetically, and how, we help each other out in this life. And he was not mine to have.
Yeah.
I was a vessel for him to get here, uh, for his parents here. And not everyone feels like that. And a lot of people do not agree with adoption and all of those things. But I saw firsthand how much it blessed their life, and how much it blessed my life in the end, to be able to turn something that was so horrific into something that was more centered around love, and not what was taken from me, but what I was able to give in a
Mhm.
different way too. So
Was this a closed adoption? Do you get any updates or have any contact?
yeah, nowadays everyone's are going to soccer games, and it's a very open adoption and things like that. It was a closed adoption. I only got letters and pictures for the first 3 years, and that's how I know he's the size of a 6-year-old at 3 years old. But after that, it was closed. I do not know. I know the
Okay.
parent's first name. I don't know the last name. I don't know what he looks like. Now he's 26 years old,
Wow.
so I have not contacted him. He has not contacted me. I am very, very, very open to that. I hope I get to do that in this lifetime. But that just has not happened yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of times these days, the child almost needs to be the initiator of
Sure.
that
Yeah.
search.
Yeah.
Um, Although I think like the DNA online things make that happen sometimes.
Yeah. And I actually just, I think it was last year, I finally did a DNA test just to have it out there, just in case he was looking,
Yeah.
and in case he did that himself, and wanted to see if there was a match. I did do that. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
so we'll kind of see where it goes from there for sure. But
Yeah. So, I mean, your story continued, obviously, right? I mean, it was a huge healing process at a
yes,
very young age. You know,
right.
um, I think I was 21 my first pregnancy, which also felt very young.
Right.
And that pregnancy wasn't a viable pregnancy. And, but then I did have my first child I was pregnant by 22. So it's like
Hmm.
I had a little bit of relevance in a sense there, but I wasn't, my decisions and my experience was different. But
Yeah.
the mindset shift too that happens, even though you didn't keep the baby, you still went through the rebirth process that every single mother goes through as they deliver a child,
Hmm.
right? Like there is a transformation that happens and
Yeah.
continues to happen every time we give birth. And in a sense, you got that and then, handed off the baby, but you still had a lot of processing. And I'm curious, like, what did that look like? What was the most supportive thing for you?
Um, I would say, luckily, I did have supportive parents and I had a place to go. Like I said, I did move back home. My siblings were kind of scattered around, but a lot of them, came and visited. My younger brother was there and he was just a great, support and comic relief and, all of those things because a little brother doesn't know what to do with that situation. But he kept, there was levity there. It kept some of the, the really heavy stuff. I mean, it's hard when you don't have a baby, but your body is still processing and healing having that child. So, having to tape and find myself because my milk, it had nowhere to go. And so eventually, that was painful. Or actually, when it came in, I thought I was doing okay for the first few days. And then that came in and I lost it. And I was just a puddle of emotion for days after that, So, and your body's still bleeding and there's nothing to show for it. So it is a very, very strange place to be. Sometimes it felt helpless. Sometimes it felt cruel that your body is still going through all this and there's not a baby to kiss on, after.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and then, and at this point you understood that you had also, this was it came from an assault. And so it's like
Right.
you never get a moment to even process
Hmm.
all of this, right? It just keeps happening and keeps happening.
Right.
And so you get to a point, almost like you can't anymore.
Yeah. Because like the physical pain just kept morphing.
Right.
Yeah. And then, I mean, of course, the emotional and mental as well. But if we're talking strictly just physical, it just kept morphing into pregnancy pains and then into
Yeah.
after birth pains. And then, tried to deal with a different body,
Yeah.
in my early, as a 20-year-old, my body doesn't look the same as everybody else's, like,
Yeah.
or that I've even been through that, or that was something now that I had to explain and
Hmm.
say, because I never wanted to keep it a secret. I never wanted someone to find out 20 years later after I'd been, in a relationship with him or anything else. So I was very forthcoming. I was very transparent and the right one, stuck and the other ones fell away. And maybe it was also, that was a protective tool too, just to
Hmm.
see like, you know,
Yeah.
some people can't handle that story and some people can.
But it's also very real. I think this is something really relevant to
Mhm.
anybody, whether they're a mom or not, but anybody who's gone through big things. I know I have this issue today. People
Yeah.
like even a small talk conversation somehow ends up going down, and they ask me a seemingly innocent question, and the honest
Right.
answer, I don't think you want the answer, but I'm going to answer you.
Yeah. Something as simple as you don't even think about, but going to the doctor.
Yeah.
As a woman, you have to write down how many births have you had? How many children do
Yes.
you have? And I always had to like,
Yeah.
do I started to say this, but then I had to tell like this whole story. And the doctor was like, well, just if it was a fine pregnancy, you don't have to write that down or, I had 3 kids, I have 4 kids, I have 5, like it was, the number wasn't adding up in my mind as the same as what I
Right,
had to
because they
write down
wanna
on
know
paper.
how many pregnancies, they wanna know how many live births, but nobody's
Right.
and so then they're gonna ask about your, this many children. You're like, "Well, actually."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
maybe they're like, gosh, your parts don't look like you've only had 2 or 3 kids. It looks like you've had this many. Or I don't know, but there
Well, and
is,
even
yeah.
the stranger saying, "How many children do you have?" Or, "Is this your first
Yeah.
pregnancy when you're pregnant
Right.
again?"
Yeah.
Right? There's so many
Yeah.
places that it shows up.
Or even the fact that, when I was having my first as a married woman with my husband and stuff, just being like, oh, well, you've done this before.
Mhm.
I'm like, well, not really. This is not the same whatsoever. Like, what do you mean? I haven't just done this before. Like, you'll be fine, kind of
Right.
thing. So people don't realize some of the things that they say sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was, it was obviously like things that are super traumatic really do stick with you, even if you've healed and all those things. it doesn't mean there isn't like this prick in your heart when you have to discuss it. Or like I said, if you're watching a movie or you're talking with someone for the first time and they say things that you're just like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
because I couldn't watch, which I mean, we probably shouldn't watch it anyway or be in movies anyway, but like sexual assault scenes I'm like, I can't watch this. This is too much,
Yeah.
and so you just never know how it could possibly come up when you say, oh, I'm good now, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think that's really very fair and relevant. And, the part of the bio that I didn't get to because I got so focused on your story is the spiritual transformation that happened
mhm,
after the fact and the places that you are today. And I would love
yeah,
to kind of touch on that because I know for me, my journey was the catalyst to a massive spiritual awakening and to
right.
understanding these pieces. And I suspect there's pieces in there for you. And I would love for you to share how this kind of catalyzed even more.
Well, mine obviously happened a long time ago. So it wasn't necessarily like, oh, that happened and then boom, my
It wasn't
spiritual.
immediate. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was definitely later on in life for me. I did have 4 children. I was very immersed in that. You're very busy. You're not necessarily thinking about yourself so much. There was a lot
Yep.
of up and down in my marriage at that time, like just a lot of different things. And so um I think for me, honestly, what kicked off my true, like, deep dive into healing process was, I got a hysterectomy.
Ooh. So the
And
opposite.
the
It's almost
opposite.
like the
Yeah.
opposite of you
Yeah.
have a baby, you give up a baby, you
Mhm.
walk out babyless, and now you're removing the uterus that
Right.
produced that.
And part of me was very trepidatious about that. I was having a lot of complications, a lot of different things. Um, but then I was ultimately like, "No, it's fine. It's okay. Like, I really think I need to do this." And then after that, Um, it's interesting when you look back, hindsight's 2020, but like different things along the way that have
Hmm.
sparked your interest or have made you think differently. Cause I was kind of in a very different spot than I was in my early 20s in my thinking, not being part of the religion I grew up in, all of those things kind of morphed. And then I had my hysterectomy. I I finally realized I was like, all of that trauma was physically removed out of my body. And that was huge. Cause not everyone gets the part out of their body physically that they've been
Yeah.
trying to heal for years. But I think that's what totally kicked off
Yeah.
um all of
Yeah. The
that for
energy,
me.
all of the darkness,
Mhm.
all of the pain was
Yeah. Trying
physically
to be
removed from
strong,
you.
trying to, move past all of those things. Um, there was still pain, and that was one of the reasons why I looked into getting a hysterectomy because I had unexplained pain, and now that
Mhm.
pain's gone in
Wow.
all the ways. and
Right.
and I think it just opened me up energetically to really be able to receive more information, to look at life very differently, to really dive deep into who I was, into how I had been navigating my whole life and people pleasing and, dimming myself and trying to make peace all the time. And um, you can be thoughtful and you can be helpful, but not at your own detriment. The self sacrifice, the self sabotage because everyone else is more important and everyone, all of those kinds of things. Now,
So relatable to so
yeah,
many people on so
yeah,
many levels.
I think moms in general, whether you've
I'm
had
just
children
sitting
or
here like,
not,
yep, yep,
yeah,
yep.
I think moms is generally you get to a point where you're kind of out of the fog
Yeah.
of like little babies, and then you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, 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 whoa. Like you
Yeah.
start to really actually even care about yourself and think
What
about
about me? Wait a
thinking.
minute.
Yeah,
Nobody thinks about, and then you realize nobody else is thinking about you because you're not thinking about you.
right. Yeah. That whole
Yeah.
thing of, well, how can I be a
Yeah.
priority to anybody else if I'm not a priority to myself and I am not caring about myself and
Yep.
losing yourself in those ways or not
Yep.
thinking you're worth it.
Yep. Yep.
So many things that we're taught, even subconsciously by peers, by teachers, by parents, by other people that we know, friends. Um, you internalize these beliefs of who you think you are and what you're worthy of. And it's so detrimental in so many ways until you can actually look at it. And looking at it after my hysterectomy, I mean, they call it the dark night of the soul. They call it tower moments, all of those things. It was horrendous. And you had to be in a place to really look at yourself and humble yourself to be like, oh, half of this is my own doing. I didn't have to suffer this way. I didn't have to think of everybody this way or myself this way. It was all how I perceived everything and what I was worthy of.
Well, in that moment, I think is really, there's a lot of, that moment for people when we see what we've done to ourselves. We see the contribution we've made to continuing the cycle. We may have not been the original catalyst of the abuse or trauma or whatever, but we absolutely participated in continuing it.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to admit to yourself. It's a really dark, hard place to be.
Yeah.
But it's necessary to have that level of accountability in order to get to the other side. It's just really uncomfortable.
Well, because you also think, gosh, if I would have just known this 15 years ago, I would be in a much different place. But I mean, everything happens in divine timing. I really do feel that way. And I really feel like I was able to go through the things that I was going through and figure things out. Because then, like my best friend really needed me these last 3 years. My daughters, who are now young adults, needed me in ways that if I hadn't done the work, if I wasn't where I am right now, I wouldn't have been able to help them through it so that they do not have to continue any of this insecurity, low self-worth, self-sacrifice, self-sabotage, all of those things. They have a very different reality and mindset because of these conversations I've been able to have with them that I just didn't have, growing up. And so I'm hopefully, the cycle's broken. They don't have to learn the same things that I did or go through the same thing. No, everyone has their own journey. But as far as that type of thing, that's where I am like, I'm so glad that I did the work and I went through what I went through, and it never ends, but at least to be kind of on the other side of understanding things in a very different perspective and in a very different light, and be able to kind of be more on a vista and looking out instead of down in the fog and not understanding what's going on all the time.
Yeah, no, I totally relate. And you're right. It's not that life doesn't happen and we still get triggered or have emotions. Yeah. We're quicker to, bounce back. We approach it, and this isn't like, oh my God, the world is ending. It's like, oh, there's some big feelings that I need to process and then I need to look at because this is trying to show me something in a different way. It's just a totally different approach.
Well, and it was interesting because as I was going through the last few years, I started reaching out to like adoption agencies, and I started going to a support group again, which I did back when I was 20. But, there's so many things that women hold on to and feel like I'm the only one who's gone through this, or nobody's going to care about my story or what I'm going through. Or when in reality, the more we speak about things, the more we shed light on things, the more we don't feel so alone. And we, there are other people that are like, I had a date rape too, but I never talked about it for 40 years, whatever that may be. It's kind of shedding light on things that have been really difficult that women just kind of go through alone. And it's helped me really kind of reach out to other birth moms and to other women that have been through, really hard things. And you start to kind of attract your tribe in that way and be open to other people and their stories and give them almost like permission. You have permission that what you went through was hard, or that you're still standing. Like, good for you. Like, let's clap for you.
You did it.
You did it. You're still here. You're crying in a birth care support group, but you freaking did it. You're here. There's something to be said for that. And I actually ended up being, now I'm on the board for United for Adoption in Utah.
Wow.
I mean, you never know where like these things can lead. And that's just literally by being myself and sharing my story. And then I kind of snowballed into a few other aspects and things. So that's been very interesting because I did not talk about it for 15, 16 years. Only like my family and my very, very closest friends knew that that was anything that happened. And I just started sharing. And then out of the woodworks, people start coming and being like, oh my gosh, thank you for saying that. Or I had no idea. I had no idea that ever happened to you. So it's very interesting to be on this side of that.
Yeah, no, I totally relate. I mean, speaking and sharing my story was for all the same reasons, to let people know they were not alone, to, help people really see that they're being in the dark places isn't something we have to hide from. And that, I get people reaching out to me as well and just want to talk to me. They just want to know.
Right. Yeah.
They just want to share in a way that feels safe because they don't have that. Then, I think that's amazing that you've been able to be that for people who've, shared your experience.
Right.
Or even a piece of it. Some of us exactly the same, but
sure.
They relate to your story, and they really, I mean, so much of the healing process is really just being seen and being feeling safe in those places that we have felt like we've had to hide from everybody, and feeling in that painful place, allowing somebody to like get in there with you and sit down and say, I see you and you're okay. And whenever you're ready, there's no hurry, but whenever you're ready, I can show you the way through.
Right. Because there was other people that kind of showed up in my world that helped me see things from a very different perspective. Or maybe what you're carrying isn't even yours. Have you ever thought of that? And I was like, whoa, what? I could be carrying something from my dad or my mom or my, ancestor. Like, are you joking? Like, oh no, like different things like that just kind of open your mind up to different things and kind of set you on a different trajectory.
Once you start to see the world as a basis of energy and frequency, it even expands even further, because, it's not only is this something part of your family, but is this reaction to what's happening in the world. Like, there's so many ways that we start to look at things differently.
Yeah. Well, and not realizing, because if you are open, especially as a child, and you don't realize it at all, oh my gosh, you absorb and things latch onto you so much more easily. And, thinking about my entire life, because there was sexual assault things as a child as well. And just how that played out again as a young adult, but also just, it's kind of amazing sometimes. And that's where I think we can maybe find a little bit of strength, is that everything that was meant to hurt you, to stop you, to destroy you, you're still standing. You're still here. And even if you were here and you were doing horribly, you're still standing,
Yeah,
but it
didn't break you. It didn't hurt,
Yeah. But it is something to put in the work and to be able to then help other people come back into the light too, and to remind them who they are and that they are these divine beings, and that you do have help from the other side all day long. And, really tap into those things that will give you strength, that not everything is outside of you and happening to you. You really can choose something different. You can change your mindset. You can think differently. You can release so much and do things differently and not care what people think.
Yeah, amen. I 100% am. And, that I preach the same thing in so many ways. And it's always, beautifully validating when somebody says the same here, because I take a look at, instead of the things that happened to me, it's like I took this horrible thing and I completely transformed it into a beautiful gift that I can share with other people. And so, nothing life throws at me can really hurt me, because I'm always going to shift it and take it and use my power to turn it into a way to help other people. And I approach all obstacles, all challenges completely differently today, because of that.
I love that. Yeah. And also just, it's okay to do things differently. And it's okay people don't understand what you're doing, or it's okay if you've been doing one thing your whole life and then you switch it up and you do something different. Or
you don't have to be the person you've always been. You don't.
Yes. Or really, so many people are living a life that they think other people want them to. Like your
Yes.
parents or your church or your friend group or whatever. You're living for them. It's not even your life. You think that it's noble of you to give up everything because, they've always wanted you to be a doctor or something, like whatever it may be. And just to be able to do things differently that way,
Yeah.
because you never know where that could lead. But also, I think because it opens up, as moms, I think it opens up a very different conversation with our children to be
Yes.
able to support them in a different way without putting all of these expectations and parameters on who they could be in their lifetime, too.
Yeah. No, I mean, so much of, I think I've said multiple times, but really, if we help moms come to the place where they're no longer trying to fit in society's boxes and they
Right.
can, move through their patterns, and they're going to raise kids and be
Yeah.
connected to kids in a way that they don't have to heal from their childhood in their first, 20 years of their adult life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they can actually be in themselves more. And kids are brilliant, but
Mhm.
we, on anything, try to, no, we can't act like that, or no, we can't do this. And so
Yeah.
instead of encouraging their brilliance, we shut it off.
Right.
And it takes somebody who's willing to step outside of the boxes and willing to do things differently to raise kids who will continue to, just like, what if could the world look like if
Yeah.
everybody was inspired to create? And
Mhm.
that's the parts that I get excited about,
Yeah.
because I have three boys, and
Yeah.
I never want them to feel like society doesn't accept them. And perhaps society
Right.
doesn't accept them, but that's okay, because we're going to change our environment. We don't need to change you to fit in society.
Yeah.
We need to show up as you so society
Mhm.
can shift to you, or we can
Yes.
create the environment that is supportive.
Yes. Because I think if more people were able to be their authentic self and not worry about what other people think, so many more people rise up to that, or at least the right people in your environment will rise
Yes,
up to that and not you feeling like so left
exactly.
out. Be your authentic self. Other people will rise up to
Yes.
that as well because you will start attracting the same energies. And honestly, everyone has something that the world needs. And if
Mhm.
it's shut off, if you're like so good at drawing or so good at sewing and everyone's telling you, no, you need to go, work a 9 to 5 in the corporate world. And you're like, but my passion is sewing, but you never know once you're actually doing those things that bring you
Yeah.
joy, that bring you happiness, that are unique to you, the world kind of opens up. And I think that'll be the same for our kids too.
Yeah.
And to be able to, so
Exactly.
like, again, they have permission to do things a little bit differently or to think a little bit differently or to show up differently. Um, so that hopefully they don't have to go through the huge awakening at 40 years old. They can kind of have those mechanisms, those tools, from the get go
Right.
to kind of shift and move and heal and let things go and all of that at a very, very young age instead of, like,
Well, and I think we're getting faster at it, because my mom
mm,
was probably in her like 50s and 60s before she really started to even be aware of some of the
yeah,
things. Like she was in the hippie world and,
yeah, yeah,
practice the very love and light, but did
right.
she actually start to look at shadows? And then, like, not really,
Yeah,
until me and I rebelled, and that kicked off a lot of
yeah,
things for
yeah,
her.
yeah,
Right. But she was, she had me in her 30s. And so that wasn't until, her late 50s and 60s.
mm,
Me, I had my big awakening more in my Saturn return, in my, and, late 20s, early 30s,
uh,
after my ex-husband stuff. So it was
right.
faster, and I got through it faster in a different way. And so now and I have kids who are still young.
Yeah,
And so if they end up starting their adulthood and more people do this, then there's going to be more adults in their 20s
yeah,
talking like this instead of just the 40-year-olds.
yes.
Right. And so it's like we're getting
Yeah,
faster.
right. Right. Well, and it's even because now, like I said, I have some girls that are in young adulthood, they have boyfriends. So it's a very, very different conversation of
Yeah.
you do not deserve to be treated like this. You do not have to accept this. Um, Make sure you're not being the one who's like doing XYZ.
Yes.
You're worthy of the best. You're worthy of someone loving you for who you are. You're worthy of someone being kind. Like, you don't have to put up with these things. You don't have to self-sacrifice. You don't have to put yourself in situations to please someone else at your detriment. Like, these are huge things that now they're learning in their relationships very young. So that's where I'm hoping, like, that's kind of a different, and that doesn't mean that they haven't gone through some terrible, horrendous things. But it was, like you said, it was a little bit quicker. It was able to shift a little bit faster to be able to kind of nip that in the bud and do things very differently.
Yeah. Well, and they have you to help support in a different way. They didn't have to, go deeper down because you were there to be like, I see you and I love you and I can still hold that mother space even though you're an adult.
Right.
And support them.
Yeah. That's what I mean. If I was in the headspace I was like 10, 12 years ago, it would have been very different when they're going with their, their relationship issues as well.
Yeah.
So I like I said, I just feel like the timing for me, even though I would have loved to have that knowledge that I have now back in the day, everything happens in divine timing. And I think it happened in a way where I was able to be where I am at for my friends and my family, to be able to help them through some really difficult times too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even to help and to be perspective, like in our birth parent group, there's some that just placed 3 months ago, and to give a very different perspective of being 26 years later, and that you'll make it, you'll be okay. It'll still sting. That'll still be part of your story. It'll still be part of you, but there's a different side to it, 20 years later, that now they can see in a tangible way too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and you get to be the example of that. And you get to be, and that you're still not just standing, but you're doing well and you're here able to share your story and support people. And, I think I know for me personally, I receive so much from that. When people reflect back to me how validated and supported, it actually helps me. And it's almost like it's this honor that I get to now sit in support of these people.
Right. And just to be like, I see you. Like you said, everyone, one of their main hurts in life is to not be seen. And so for someone to be like, I see you, I feel for you, I cheer you, and I can hold your hand while you're going through it. And I don't just sympathize, I empathize, and you're going to be okay. And I think, just more women kind of speaking out about things, and we don't really have the same village. Everything's so separated now, and it's not like you have like this huge village with you all the time as you're navigating not just motherhood, but growing as a woman in the different stages of 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. And so I think it's important kind of now more than ever for people to really speak. And that has been something that I knew I needed to do. I had such a fear of it, and I still do. But, do it scared, do it afraid anyway, just do it. And I think it's really important for women to be able to hear other people's stories and to connect and to know that they're not alone.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is what I'm doing what I'm doing. This is why I'm sharing these stories. This is why I wanted to lift up other people's stories, because why people can relate to my journey. There's so many there are similarities to so much of it. And, I also see myself in various pieces of other people's journeys. And I think, people hearing that and relating to pieces of it, and, it not only helps them feel seen, it helps build courage, it helps make them realize that, they have choices, they can change their lives, they can do things differently, and that every place, wherever you are in the journey, is okay and necessary for you in this moment, but that if you don't enjoy it, you can change it.
Yes. Well, and that you never know what's going to happen in life. So as long as you know that you can make it through and kind of navigate those waters when you get it.
Thank you for joining us on Awakened Motherhood. I hope today's episode inspired you and offered support for your journey. Remember, your story has the power to ignite change, and your resilience is a testament to your strength as a mother. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Share it with other mothers who might benefit from our stories of empowerment and healing. I invite you to connect with me on social media platforms at Amanda Quick Healing, or visit my website, amandaquickhealing.com, for more information on other ways to work with me. Until next time, keep embracing your divine self and discovering your warrior mama within. Thank you for being part of Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.